The champagne bubbles tickled my throat as I watched my wife raise her glass at my 41st birthday party. The Harren Gallery looked magnificent tonight. Soft lighting cast warm shadows across the carefully curated paintings, and Chicago's art elite mingled among the sculptures with practiced sophistication. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt like a fraud standing in my own gallery. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elin announced, her voice carrying that theatrical quality she'd perfected over our 12 years of marriage. Her auburn hair caught the gallery lights perfectly, and her emerald dress hugged her figure in all the right places. She was stunning, I had to admit. She was also a snake. "To my wonderful husband, Miles," she continued, her smile sharp as broken glass, "who finally learned his place." The crowd of 30-odd guests erupted in laughter. Marcy Chen, Elin's closest friend and a local art influencer, practically cackled. Simone Hartwell, another gallery owner who'd been circling like a vulture for years, raised her glass with obvious delight. Even my half-brother Tanner, standing near the Rothko prince with his usual sleazy grin, joined the chorus. I felt every eye in the room on me. The art critics, the wealthy collectors, the young artists hoping for their big break. They all expected me to laugh along, to play the role of the domesticated husband who'd learned to accept his diminished status in his own business. Instead, I smiled and raised my own glass. "Thank you, darling," I said, letting my voice carry across the suddenly expectant room. "And here's to my ex-wife, who will learn hers when the judge reviews these financial records tomorrow." The laughter stopped like someone had cut the power to a speaker system. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. Marcy's mouth fell open in a perfect O of shock. Simone's eyes went wide, and I caught her glancing toward the exit. But it was Elin's reaction that made the whole evening worthwhile. Her face went through a fascinating transformation, confusion, then recognition, then something approaching panic before she managed to force that practiced smile back into place. "Miles, honey," she said, her voice pitched just a little too high. "What are you talking about?" I pulled the manila envelope from my jacket pocket and set it on the nearest display table with a satisfying thump. "Barcelona bank statements, quarterly wire transfers, some very interesting photographs of you and your business partner Damon Vossel. Oh, and your children." The silence stretched like a taut wire. Tanner knocked over his wine glass, sending red liquid cascading across the white marble floor. The sound of shattering crystal seemed to wake everyone from their trance. "I think," I said, looking around the room at the frozen faces, "this party just got a lot more interesting." Veda Talrin, our gallery assistant, stood near the back wall looking like she wanted to disappear entirely. She was 26, nervous by nature, and had been acting strange for weeks. Now, I knew why. The poor girl was caught in the middle of something much bigger than she'd bargained for. "Miles," Elin said, stepping closer to me, "you're making a scene. These are our friends." "Our friends?" I laughed, and it came out harsher than I'd intended. "Elin, most of these people have been waiting years for us to implode. They're not disappointed." Detective Ray King, my old college roommate who'd somehow ended up in law enforcement, pushed through the crowd. He wasn't supposed to be here. I'd invited him as a friend, not as a cop, but the timing couldn't have been better. "Everything okay here, Miles?" Ray asked, his hand resting casually on his belt. "Everything's perfect," I said. "Just sharing some family news with our guests." Elin's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. She grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my sleeve. "We need to talk. Privately." "Oh, we'll talk," I said, gently removing her hand. "In court, with lawyers present, and a judge who's very interested in hearing about your dual citizenship and your secret life as Elena Venton." The name hit her like a physical blow. She actually stumbled backward, catching herself against the display table. The manila envelope crinkled under her hand. "How did you—" she started. then caught herself. Find out, I finished. It's amazing what a good private investigator can discover when you give him the right financial records to follow. Carson's very thorough. Tanner finally found his voice. Miles, you're way out of line here. Whatever you think you know. I know you've been taking a 15% commission on every forged piece that's moved through your auction house, I said, turning to face my half-brother. I know you helped Elin set up the offshore trust, and I know you've been using my notary credentials to authenticate fake provenance documents. Tanner's face flushed red. He was 43, 2 years older than me, and had always thought he was smarter. Our father had left us equal shares in the family business, but Tanner had spent years trying to edge me out. Now his schemes were unraveling in front of Chicago's art establishment. You can't prove any of that, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I pulled out my phone and opened the audio app. Actually, I can. Would you like me to play the recording of you and Elin discussing the Rothko forgeries? Or should we start with the conversation about my shellfish allergy and how convenient it would be if I had an accident at the gallery opening next month? Elin made a sound like a wounded animal. Several guests gasped. Marcy dropped her champagne glass, adding to the mess on the floor. You're lying, Elin whispered, but she was backing toward the gallery's rear exit. Am I? I held up the phone. Should we find out together? Ray stepped forward, his cop instincts finally kicking in. Miles, if you have evidence of criminal activity, we should discuss this downtown. We should, I agreed. But first, I think our guests deserve to know what they've been buying from the Harren Gallery for the past 3 years. I walked over to the centerpiece of tonight's exhibition, a Rothko that we'd been marketing as an original from 1958, priced at $2.8 million. With a dramatic flourish that would have made Elin proud, I lifted the frame and turned it around. Notice anything interesting about the canvas? I asked the crowd. Like the Made in China stamp on the back? Or the fact that the paint is still tacky because it was printed last Tuesday? The room erupted. Voices rose in anger, shock, and fear. Several collectors who'd been eyeing the piece looked like they wanted to be sick. Others were already pulling out their phones, probably calling their lawyers. Elin made her break for the exit, but Ray was faster. Ma'am, I think you should stay put for a few minutes. This is harassment, she snapped, but she stopped moving toward the door. Tanner, meanwhile, was trying to blend into the crowd like he hadn't been standing next to me 5 minutes ago. I caught his eye and smiled. Going somewhere, brother? This is insane, he said. You've lost your mind. Maybe, I admitted, but I found something much more valuable, the truth. I looked around the room at the faces of people I'd known for years. Some looked shocked, others angry. A few seemed almost excited by the drama. These were the people Elin had called friends, the ones who'd laughed when she humiliated me in front of them. You know what the funny thing is? I said to no one in particular. I actually loved her. For 12 years, I thought we were building something together. I thought the gallery was our dream, our legacy. Elin's composure finally cracked completely. Miles, please. We can work this out. Whatever you think you know, there's an explanation. There is, I agreed. The explanation is that you're a fraud, a forger, and a bigamist. The explanation is that you've been stealing from our joint accounts to support your other family in Spain. The explanation is that you and my brother have been planning to have me eliminated so you can inherit everything. The word eliminated sent another shockwave through the crowd. Ray's hand moved closer to his radio. That's enough, Elin said, her voice turning cold and sharp. You want to play this game? Fine, but you have no idea what you're up against. Actually, I said, I think I do. I pulled a second envelope from my jacket, this one thicker, heavier. Veda, would you like to tell everyone about the $50,000 you received to change your statement about the authentication certificates? Or should I just read your text messages with Elin? Veda looked like she might faint. She'd been standing frozen near the back wall, but now she stepped forward on shaking legs. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harren," she whispered. "I needed the money. My mom's medical bills." "I know," I said gently. "And I don't blame you. You were threatened and bribed. That's not your fault." Elin's mask finally fell away completely. The sophisticated gallery manager, the charming hostess, the loving wife, all of it vanished, leaving something cold and calculating in its place. "You think you're so smart," she hissed. "You think you've won something here, but you have no idea what's coming for you." "Enlighten me," I said. She looked around the room, at the shocked faces of our guests, at Ray with his hand on his radio, at Tanner who was slowly edging toward the side exit. "This isn't over," she said, finally. "Not even close." The gallery cleared out faster than a theater during a fire alarm. Within 20 minutes, only Ray, Veda, and I remained among the scattered champagne glasses and abandoned canapes. Elin had left with Tanner after Ray made it clear they were free to go but shouldn't leave town. I could have pressed charges immediately, but I wanted to see how far they'd dig themselves in first. "You want to tell me what this is really about?" Ray asked, loosening his tie. He'd been a cop for 15 years, and nothing surprised him anymore. But tonight had come close. I handed him the thick envelope. "Everything's in there. Bank records, photographs, recorded conversations, witness statements. Carson's been working on this for 3 months. Ray whistled low as he flipped through the documents. "This is federal stuff, Miles. Wire fraud, forgery, possibly conspiracy. Why didn't you bring this to us sooner?" "Because I wanted to be sure," I said, "and because I wanted to give Elin enough rope to hang herself." Veda was still standing near the wall, looking miserable. I walked over to her, keeping my voice gentle. "How long has this been going on?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. 2 years, maybe longer. At first I thought Mrs. Harren was just being extra careful about the authentication process. Then I started noticing discrepancies. "What kind of discrepancies?" "Certificates that didn't match the pieces, provenance documents that looked too new, and the way she'd handle certain transactions personally, without involving you." I nodded. It all made sense now. Elin had been using my reputation and credentials to legitimize fake pieces, then splitting the profits with Tanner and sending her share to Spain. "When did she approach you about changing your statement?" "Last month. She said there had been a misunderstanding about some paperwork, and that if I corrected my statement, she could help with my mother's medical expenses." Veda's voice was barely above a whisper. "I knew it was wrong, but Mom needed surgery, and insurance wouldn't cover it all." "Show me the messages," I said. Veda pulled out her phone with trembling hands. The text thread with Elin was damning, clear instructions on what to say, when to say it, and promises of payment. But it was the final message that made my stomach clench. "If you change your mind about our arrangement, remember that accidents happen in galleries all the time, especially to people who don't watch where they're going." Ray looked over my shoulder at the screen. "That's witness intimidation, and that last bit sounds like a threat." "It is a threat," I said. "Elin's been using intimidation tactics for years. I just never realized how far she'd go." My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Carson's name appeared on the screen. "Miles, we have a problem," the private investigator said without preamble. "I've been watching your brother's place like you asked. He just loaded 3 suitcases into his car and is heading toward O'Hare." "Follow him," I said. "But don't intervene. Just document everything." I turned to Ray. "Tanner's running." "Not if I can help it," Ray said, already reaching for his radio. "I'll have airport security detain him for questioning." While Ray coordinated with airport police, I walked through the gallery, looking at the pieces I'd thought I knew so well. How many were fake? How many legitimate collectors had we defrauded? The thought made me sick. My phone rang again. This time it was an unknown international number. "Hello, Miles." The voice was unfamiliar, with a slight Spanish accent. "I think it's time we talked." Damon Vossel, I presume. Indeed, your wife has told me so much about you. My ex-wife, I corrected. And I'm sure she has, though probably not the truth. Damon chuckled, a sound like ice clinking in a glass. Truth is relative, don't you think? Especially in the art world. Not when it comes to fraud and forgery. Ah, but you see, that's where you're wrong. What you call fraud, we call creative interpretation. What you call forgery, we call homage. What you call theft, I call grounds for prosecution. Prosecution requires evidence that will hold up in court, Damon said smoothly, and evidence has a way of disappearing when the right pressure is applied. Is that a threat? It's a reality. You've made some very powerful people very unhappy tonight, Miles. People who don't appreciate having their investments questioned. I felt a chill run down my spine. What people? The kind who prefer anonymity. The kind who have invested heavily in certain pieces from your gallery over the past few years. The kind who don't like surprises. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Damon continued. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to retract everything you said tonight. You're going to claim it was a misunderstanding, perhaps brought on by stress or medication. You're going to restore confidence in the gallery's reputation. And if I don't? Then you'll discover that accidents really do happen in galleries, especially to people who don't know when to stop digging. The line went silent. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. This was bigger than just Elin and Tanner. They'd been fronting for something much larger, much more dangerous. Ray finished his radio conversation and walked back over. Airport security has your brother. He was trying to board a flight to Madrid with a briefcase full of cash and some very interesting documents. What kind of documents? Looks like client lists, financial records, and what appears to be a catalog of forged pieces with their current locations. Ray's expression was grim. Miles, how deep does this go? Before I could answer, Veda gasped from across the room. She was staring at her phone, her face pale. What is it? I asked. Mrs. Harren just sent me another message. She held up the phone with a shaking hand. The message was brief but chilling. You should have kept your mouth shut. Check your car before you drive home tonight. Ray was already moving toward the exit. We're calling the bomb squad. Nobody leaves this building until we know it's safe. As we waited for the police to secure the area, I realized that my birthday party revelation had been just the opening move in a much larger game. Elin, Tanner, and Damon weren't just art forgers. They were part of something that reached into the highest levels of the art world, something worth threatening and intimidating people to protect. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I pulled out my phone and opened the secure app Carson had installed. With a few taps, I activated the recording devices he'd hidden throughout the gallery 3 weeks ago. Every conversation, every threat, every admission of guilt was being captured and uploaded to a secure server. What are you doing? Ray asked. Setting a trap, I said. If they want to play games, let's see how they handle the rules when I'm the one making them. The bomb squad found the device under Veda's Honda Civic at 3 a.m. It wasn't sophisticated, just enough plastic explosive to maim or intimidate, not eliminate. The message was clear: cooperate or escalate. I chose escalation. Carson met me at my apartment as the sun was rising over Lake Michigan. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, which was probably accurate. Private investigators don't keep bankers' hours, especially when their cases involve international fraud rings. Your brother's talking, he said, settling into my kitchen chair with a cup of coffee. Airport security found more than just cash in that briefcase. There were authentication certificates with your forged signature, correspondence with buyers in 12 different countries, and a very detailed ledger of payments. Payments to whom? That's where it gets interesting. Most of the money was going to shell companies in Spain, the Cayman Islands, and Switzerland. But there were also payments to people here in Chicago, gallery owners, auction house employees, even a few art critics. I felt the pieces clicking into place. They weren't just forging individual pieces. They were corrupting the entire authentication system. Exactly. And your wife was the linchpin. She had access to your credentials, your reputation, and your client base. She could legitimize anything. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Rooftop, 1 hour. Come alone, or Veda pays the price. Carson read the message over my shoulder. That's not Elin's style. Too direct. It's Damon, I said. He's in Chicago. How do you know? Because Elin would have used more words. She likes to hear herself talk. Damon's more efficient. Carson stood up, checking his concealed weapon. We call Ray. Set up surveillance. Go in wired. No, I said. If we spook them now, they'll disappear and we'll never get the full scope of this operation. I need to see how deep it goes. Miles, these people just tried to blow up your assistant. They're not playing games. Neither am I. I spent the next hour preparing. Carson had equipped me with a nearly invisible recording device and a GPS tracker. Ray was positioned in an unmarked car 2 blocks away, close enough to respond but far enough to avoid detection. The rooftop meeting was set for the Millennium Building, a 30-story office tower in the Loop. I took the elevator to the top floor, then climbed the service stairs to the roof access. The wind was brutal up there, whipping across the concrete and steel with enough force to make standing difficult. Damon was waiting by the edge, looking like he'd stepped out of a European fashion magazine. Tall, dark hair, perfectly styled despite the wind, expensive suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to face real consequences. Miles, he said, extending a hand like we were meeting for lunch. Thank you for coming. I ignored the handshake. Where's Elin? Safe. For now. He walked to the ledge, looking out over the city. Beautiful view from up here. You can see everything. The lake, the galleries, the museums, all those temples to art and culture. Get to the point. The point is perspective, Damon said, turning back to me. From up here, everything looks small, manageable. People become dots, problems become minor inconveniences. Is that supposed to intimidate me? It's supposed to educate you. He pulled out a tablet and swiped to a photo. Do you recognize this man? The image showed a middle-aged man in a gallery setting, examining a painting. I'd never seen him before. Should I? His name was Richard Pemberton. He owned a gallery in London, very respected, very thorough in his authentication process. Last year, he began questioning some pieces that had come through our network. What happened to him? Heart attack. Very sudden, very convenient. The stress of running a business, you understand. The implication was clear. I kept my expression neutral, but my hand moved instinctively toward the panic button Carson had given me. Here's another one, Damon said, swiping to a new photo. Maria Santos, an art critic in Barcelona. She was writing an exposé about forged Picassos flooding the European market. Let me guess. Car accident? Mugging gone wrong. Very tragic. Damon closed the tablet and fixed me with a stare that was probably meant to be intimidating. It was, but I'd been intimidated by experts. Elin had been practicing psychological warfare on me for years. Now, he continued, let's talk about your future. You have 2 choices. You can continue down this path of righteous indignation, in which case you'll join Richard and Maria in their unfortunate circumstances. Or you can be smart. Define smart. You retract your accusations. You blame tonight's outburst on stress, medication, whatever story you prefer. You restore confidence in the gallery's reputation and continue operating as you have been, with some minor adjustments to the authentication process. And in return, you get to keep breathing. Your assistant gets to keep all her limbs attached, and you receive a very generous percentage of future profits. I pretended to consider this. What kind of percentage? 20% of net proceeds from authenticated pieces. Based on our current volume, that's roughly $2 million per year. That's a lot of money. It's a small price for staying alive. I walked to the edge of the roof, looking down at the street 30 floors below. Cars moved like toys, people like ants. From up here, Damon was right. Everything looked manageable. "There's just one problem with your offer," I said. "Which is?" "I already know too much." I turned back to face him. "You've told me about Richard and Maria. You've confirmed that this is an international operation. You've admitted to witness intimidation and attempted assault. Even if I wanted to take your deal, I'd always be a liability." Damon's confident smile faltered slightly. "You're overthinking this." "Am I? Because from where I stand, it seems like the smart move for you would be to eliminate me, no matter what I agree to. Take over the gallery entirely. Use my demise as a warning to anyone else thinking of causing trouble." "You're paranoid." "I'm realistic." I pulled out my phone and opened the audio app. "Also, I'm recording this conversation. Has been running since I got up here." Damon's hand moved toward his jacket, but I was already backing toward the stairwell. "I wouldn't," I said. "My private investigator has a very clear view of this rooftop through his scope. Any sudden movements and this becomes a police matter very quickly." "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I gestured toward the adjacent building, where Carson was positioned with his telephoto lens. "Wave hello." Damon looked where I was pointing, his face darkening as he spotted the glint of the camera lens. "This isn't over," he said. "No," I agreed, "but it's not going the way you planned either." I backed toward the stairwell, keeping my eyes on Damon until I reached the door. Then I turned and ran, taking the stairs 3 at a time, my heart hammering against my ribs. The recording device had captured everything. The threats, the admissions, the implied confessions about Richard and Maria. It wasn't enough to convict anyone of anything specific, but it was enough to establish a pattern. More importantly, it was enough to bait the trap I was setting. The FBI arrived at my apartment before I did. Agent Sarah Lyle was waiting in the lobby with 2 other agents and a warrant to search the premises. She was mid-40s, professional, and clearly not in the mood for games. "Mr. Harren, we need to discuss your gallery's business practices," she said, without preamble. "Perfect timing," I said, handing her the recording device from my rooftop meeting. "I think you'll find this very educational." Agent Lyle listened to the recording twice, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. When it finished, she looked up at me with something approaching respect. "You realize you just put yourself in extreme danger." "I realize I'm already in extreme danger. The question is whether you're going to help me do something about it. That depends on how much cooperation we're talking about." I led them up to my apartment, where Carson was waiting with 3 laptops and enough surveillance equipment to stock a spy movie. He'd been busy while I was on the rooftop. "Show them," I said. Carson pulled up a series of photographs on his main screen. "We've been tracking communications between Elin Harren, Tanner Jossman, and at least 6 other individuals in 4 countries. The operation is bigger than we initially thought." The photos showed Elin entering and leaving various locations around Chicago: banks, shipping companies, storage facilities. In several images, she was accompanied by people I didn't recognize. "Who are they?" Agent Lyle asked. "Local muscle," Carson said. "The tall one with the scar is Marcus Webb, ex-military, currently works security for high-end auction houses. The woman with the red hair is Jennifer Kowalski. She runs a shipping company that specializes in art transportation." "And they're all part of this forgery ring?" "They're all receiving payments from the same offshore accounts that Elin's been using," Carson confirmed. "We're talking about a network that spans at least 12 countries and involves dozens of galleries, auction houses, and private collectors." Agent Lyle studied the evidence for several minutes, then made a decision. "We're going to need your full cooperation. This becomes a federal investigation as of right now." "What do you need from me?" "We need you to go back to business as usual. Continue operating the gallery, maintain contact with your wife and brother, act like nothing has changed. They'll never believe that. Not after tonight. They will if you give them a reason to. Agent Lyle pulled out a folder and handed it to me. We're going to stage your arrest. Public, humiliating, complete with perp walk and media coverage. As far as anyone knows, you've been charged with fraud and released on bail pending trial. I opened the folder and read the fake charges. They were comprehensive and damning, exactly the kind of thing that would make Elin and her associates think they'd won. This is brilliant, I said. They'll think I'm neutralized, maybe even desperate enough to cooperate with them. Exactly. Meanwhile, we'll be monitoring all communications, tracking financial transactions, and building cases against everyone involved. Carson looked up from his computer. There's something else. I've been monitoring Elin's phone, and she just received a very interesting call. He played the audio through his speakers. Elin's voice was tense, stressed. No, I don't think he'll be a problem anymore. The rooftop meeting should have convinced him to back down. What do you mean he was recording it? How do you know that? I don't care what he thinks he has. We proceed as planned. The insurance money will more than cover any losses from the gallery. Yes, I understand the timeline. Everything will be ready by Friday. The call ended, leaving us in silence. Insurance money? Agent Lyle asked. Life insurance, I said, the pieces falling into place. She's planning to have me eliminated and collect on my policy. How much are we talking about? 5 million, plus whatever she can liquidate from the gallery before anyone realizes what's happening. Agent Lyle stood up, her decision made. We're moving up the timeline. The fake arrest happens tonight. Full media coverage, complete with statements about your cooperation with federal investigators. What about Veda? She's still in danger. We'll put her in protective custody. As far as anyone knows, she's fled the city in fear for her life. Carson began packing up his equipment. I'll maintain surveillance on Elin and the others. If they make any moves toward violence, we'll know immediately. As the FBI agents prepared to leave, Agent Lyle turned back to me. Mr. Harren, I want you to understand the risks here. These people have already demonstrated a willingness to use violence. If they discover that your arrest is staged, your life will be in immediate danger. I understand, I said. But they've already destroyed my marriage, my business, and my reputation. I'm not going to let them get away with it. Good. Because tomorrow, you're going to call your wife and offer to cooperate with their operation. You're going to be desperate, defeated, and willing to do whatever it takes to stay out of prison. That shouldn't be hard to fake. It better not be, because if they see through the act, this whole operation falls apart. 3 hours later, I was handcuffed and perp walked out of the Harren Gallery in front of a dozen news cameras. The charges were read aloud for the media: conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and operating a criminal enterprise. I played my part perfectly, head down, shoulders slumped, the picture of a broken man facing the destruction of everything he'd built. The news coverage was exactly what we'd hoped for. By morning, every art publication in the country was running the story. Miles Harren, respected authenticator and gallery owner, arrested in massive forgery scandal. Elin called me at 8 a.m. Miles, honey, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I saw the news. This is terrible. It's over, I said, letting my voice crack slightly. They have everything: bank records, recordings, witness statements. My lawyer says I'm looking at 20 years minimum. Oh, sweetheart, is there anything I can do to help? Actually, I said, there might be. My lawyer thinks that if I can demonstrate cooperation with the investigation, show that I was just a pawn in someone else's operation, they might reduce the charges. What kind of cooperation? Information about the real organizers, names, locations, financial records. The FBI is particularly interested in the international connections. There was a long pause. When Elin spoke again, her voice was different, calculating, predatory. We should meet, she said. Discuss how we can help each other through this difficult time. I'd like that, I said. I've missed you. I've missed you too, darling. More than you know. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was survive long enough to spring it. Elin suggested we meet at the gallery after hours. For privacy, she said, though I knew the real reason. She wanted me on familiar ground, surrounded by the art and artifacts that represented everything I was about to lose. It was psychological warfare, and she was very good at it. I arrived at 8 p.m. using my key to enter through the back entrance. The gallery felt different in the darkness, larger somehow, full of shadows and whispers. The paintings watched me from their frames like silent witnesses to my humiliation. Elin was waiting in the main exhibition room, standing beneath the spotlight that illuminated our centerpiece Monet. She'd changed clothes since the morning. Gone was the conservative business suit, replaced by a flowing black dress that made her look like a widow at a very stylish funeral. "Hello, Miles," she said softly. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for agreeing to help," I replied, keeping my voice humble, defeated. "I don't know what I would have done if you'd turned your back on me completely." "We're still married," she said, walking closer. "For better or worse, remember?" "I remember." I gestured around the gallery. "I also remember when we first opened this place. You said it was going to be our legacy. It still can be, with some adjustments." "What kind of adjustments?" Elin moved to the bar cart in the corner and poured 2 glasses of wine. "The kind that acknowledge reality. The art world isn't about authenticity anymore, Miles. It's about perception, marketing, and giving wealthy people what they want to believe they're buying." She handed me a glass. The wine was expensive, a bottle we'd been saving for a special occasion. "So we're celebrating?" I asked. "We're toasting new beginnings." I raised my glass but didn't drink. Something felt wrong about the whole setup. Elin was being too friendly, too accommodating. This wasn't the woman who'd humiliated me at my birthday party 3 days ago. "Tell me about the FBI investigation," she said, settling into one of the leather chairs we kept for important clients. "What exactly do they want to know?" "Everything. Financial records, supplier contacts, authentication processes. They're particularly interested in any international connections." "And what have you told them?" "Nothing yet. My lawyer advised me to wait until we could work out some kind of deal." Elin nodded approvingly. "Smart. Information is valuable. You don't give it away for free." "That's what I was hoping you could help me with. If I'm going to cooperate with the investigation, I need to know who I'm protecting and who I'm giving up." "That depends on what kind of future you want." She stood and walked to the window overlooking the street. A few pedestrians hurried past, hunched against the October wind. "Option 1, she said. "You tell the FBI everything you know. You implicate me, Tanner, and everyone else in our network. You probably get a reduced sentence, maybe 5 years instead of 20. When you get out, you'll be radioactive in the art world. No one will trust you, no one will work with you, and you'll spend the rest of your life selling insurance or managing a hardware store." I winced. It was a plausible future, and not an appealing one. "Option 2, Elin continued. "You give the FBI just enough information to satisfy them, but you protect the key players. You take responsibility for your part in the operation, serve maybe 2 years in a minimum security facility, and when you get out, you'll have friends who remember your loyalty. Friends with money. Friends with a lot of money. Enough to set you up with a new gallery, a new reputation, a fresh start." I pretended to consider this. "What about us? Our marriage?" Elin turned back to me, her expression unreadable. "What about it? Do we have a future together? After all this?" For a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something cold and calculating beneath the surface. Then she smiled, and the loving wife was back. "Of course we do, darling. We just need to get through this difficult period first." "And the children in Barcelona?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She actually stepped backward, her hand moving to her throat. "What children?" Elena, I said softly. I know about Elena Venton. I know about Damon. I know about the 9-year-old girl and the 7-year-old boy. The mask fell away completely. When Elin looked at me now, there was no love, no warmth, no pretense of partnership. There was only cold calculation. How long have you known? Long enough to understand why you needed me gone. And yet you came here tonight, alone, unarmed. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small pistol. That wasn't very smart, Miles. I raised my hand slowly, the wine glass still clutched in my right hand. Elin, you don't want to do this. Don't I? You've destroyed everything I've worked for. My reputation, my business relationships, my carefully constructed life. Do you have any idea how long it took me to build this operation? 12 years, I said. Since the day we got married. Since before we got married. You were never the target, Miles. You were just the means to an end. A respected name, a clean reputation, access to the right social circles. The confession hurt more than I'd expected. 12 years of marriage reduced to a business transaction. The children, I said. Are they even yours? They're mine. Damon's and mine. The family I actually chose, not the one I had to pretend to want. And the plan was to eliminate me and inherit everything? The plan was to eliminate you and disappear. New identities, new country, enough money to live comfortably for the rest of our lives. She gestured with the gun toward the back of the gallery. Unfortunately, you've forced me to accelerate the timeline. The FBI knows I'm here. No, they don't. I've been monitoring their communications since yesterday. They think you're at home, sulking and drinking yourself into a stupor. She was wrong, but I couldn't let her know that. Carson was positioned across the street with a clear view of the gallery's interior. Agent Lyle and her team were 2 blocks away, ready to move the moment I gave the signal. Walk toward the back room, Elin ordered. Slowly. I complied, moving carefully through the gallery. The back room was where we stored pieces waiting for authentication, a windowless space filled with easels, packing materials, and industrial lighting. This is where they'll find you, Elin said conversationally. Apparent suicide, brought on by the shame of your arrest and the destruction of your reputation. Very tragic, very believable. Except for the bullet wound. There won't be one. Overdose. I slipped something into your wine earlier. You should start feeling the effects any minute now. As if on cue, I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. The wine. I'd been so focused on her words that I hadn't noticed the bitter aftertaste. What did you give me? Nothing fatal, yet, just something to make you compliant while I arrange the scene. My vision started to blur around the edges. Whatever she'd used was fast-acting and powerful. I had maybe 5 minutes before I'd be completely helpless. I reached into my pocket and pressed the panic button Carson had given me, hoping he was still watching, hoping the signal would get through. Damon's here, isn't he? I asked, trying to keep Elin talking while the cavalry arrived. He's waiting outside. We'll stage your suicide, then disappear before anyone realizes what happened. And Tanner? Tanner's already gone. Permanent vacation, you might say. The room was starting to spin. I grabbed onto a nearby easel for support, knocking over a canvas in the process. You won't get away with this, I said, though the words came out slurred. I already have. That's when the lights went out. The gallery's main power had been cut, plunging us into complete darkness. Elin cursed, her gun firing once into the ceiling as she spun around in confusion. FBI, drop your weapon! Agent Lyle's voice echoed through the gallery. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a red, hellish glow. Elin was silhouetted against the doorway, her gun raised, her face twisted with rage and desperation. You set me up, she snarled. I learned from the best, I replied. The next few minutes were chaos. Federal agents swarmed the gallery from multiple entrances. Elin fired twice more before Carson tackled her from behind, sending the gun skittering across the floor. I collapsed against the wall, the drug in my system finally overwhelming my ability to stay upright. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was Elin being handcuffed, screaming threats and obscenities as they dragged her toward the exit. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm and Agent Lyle sitting in the chair beside me. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I've been poisoned by my wife." "Technically, your ex-wife. The divorce papers were filed this morning. Also, she's been charged with attempted homicide, conspiracy to commit fraud, and about 15 other felonies." "And Damon?" "In custody. He was waiting outside the gallery with a van full of forged paintings and enough evidence to convict him 10 times over." I tried to sit up, wincing as the movement sent waves of nausea through my system. "What about the network? The other galleries? The international connections?" "We're rolling them up as we speak. Your recordings and Carson's surveillance gave us everything we needed. This operation is finished." Agent Lyle stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Mr. Harren, you did good work. A lot of people are going to avoid being defrauded because of what you did." After she left, I lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. 12 years of marriage gone. My gallery, probably finished. My reputation in the art world, permanently damaged. But I was alive, and Elin, Damon, and Tanner were facing decades in prison. Sometimes, survival is the best revenge of all. The nurse came in to check my vitals, and I asked her to turn on the news. The story was already breaking on every major network. International art forgery ring exposed. Gallery owner's wife arrested in murder plot. FBI breaks up multi-million-dollar fraud operation. My phone, returned to me by the hospital staff, had dozens of missed calls and messages. Reporters, lawyers, other gallery owners, even a few Hollywood producers interested in the movie rights. I turned it off and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I'd start rebuilding. Tonight, I was content to know that the people who'd tried to destroy me were getting exactly what they deserved. The gallery might be finished, but Miles Harren wasn't. Not by a long shot.